Does watching movies and series really help you to learn a language or even, become fluent in that language? Well, here's my experience. I actually love using this method to learn languages. I recently watched 2 cartoon series in Spanish. I watched Avatar La Leyenda de Aang and also La Leyenda de Korra in Spanish, and this is what happened after I watched those 2 series in Spanish. So one of the things that I struggle with a lot in Spanish are tenses. Spanish has a lot of tenses. For example, just to give you an idea, when I start learning French, I focus on maybe 4 tenses at first. So the present tense, le passé composé, l'imparfait, le simple futur. In Spanish, I feel like if I wanted to learn the equivalent of those tenses in French, I'd have to learn the present tense, the present continuous tense, the past tense, which is the pretérito, imperfecto, and also past continuous tense. Then you have the future tense, and then they have the present perfect tense, which is similar to like the passé composé in French. That's a lot. And I get all of those confused. On top of that, in Spanish, you have 2 verbs for to be. So when I'm thinking about saying something, like for example, in the past, and I have to use one of those verbs, I have like 4 different words to choose from. It's crazy. Is this pretérito? Is this imperfecto? So am I going to use estaba? Am I going to use estuve? Am I going to use era? Am I going to use fue? Like, that's just so much. After watching the cartoon, I got a better idea of how to actually use these words and these tenses, and I got to recognize them much better. So that's something that I'm genuinely happy about, because it be confusing sometimes, I tell you. Another thing that it helped me with, which I think is really important, is how to pronounce words when they have the stress mark on top of it, because that will help you to differentiate between different words. For example, if I'm saying I speak, it will be hablo, but if you're saying he speaks, it's hablo, because there is a tilde on top of the O. The stress marks actually play a huge part when it comes to the language. I also learned some of my favorite phrases from watching the cartoon. Like for example, I learned how to say justa aquí, salta ahí, no puede ser, no lo puedo creer, estaré bien, no te preocupes, lo haré, es suficiente, basta, alto, voy a buscarlo, tráeme algo para comer, etc, etc, etc. I also practice my pronunciation a lot by trying to repeat everything that they said. And one thing that I noticed is that Spanish is really fast compared to other languages, so that's something I have to get used to as well. And watching the cartoons kind of helped me to get used to the pace a little bit. I also watched the cartoon with Spanish audio but English subtitles. I know some persons don't recommend that, but for me it worked really well, because while I was hearing what was being said, I could see the translation of it on the screen, and that helped me to connect words much better in my head. And also it helped me to hear things better, because when you see the translation, you kind of have an idea of what is supposed to be said, so you can hear it better, if that makes sense. With my level in Spanish, watching it with Spanish subtitles would have been so difficult, because every minute I'd have to stop and like research something, and the whole point of watching the cartoon is to enjoy it and learn Spanish at the same time. If I have to stop every minute to find a new translation of a different word, especially a word that I'm not even going to use in my daily life, it's just going to be too much. So all in all, would I recommend using movies, series, and cartoons to learn a language? 100% yes. Do I think it makes you fluent? I think that's up to the person. I don't think that's going to work for me, so I really have no idea how that works. So